I'm Elizabeth Doran, President and CEO of North Carolina Theater, which has proudly been producing professional theater and education programming in Raleigh for over 37 years. Welcome to All In, community conversations presented by PNC. This digital series of community dialogues examines the themes of our shows that tie to the hopes, ambitions, and challenges of our North Carolina community. Today I'm on site at Healing Transitions, Raleigh's last house on the block for people seeking resources for drug and alcohol recovery, and our community partner for our production of Ring of Fire. This episode of All In, we dive into the intersection of art and recovery, and how Johnny Cash himself experienced both the pain of addiction and the redemption of recovery. To provide context, we've invited our director and music director, Randy Redd, to speak with us about our production of Ring of Fire.
My name is Randy Redd. I am the director and music director of Ring of Fire here at North Carolina Theater. I grew up in Mississippi. I grew up with this music. Johnny Cash was in my life. I was a pianist when I was a kid. I grew up playing the piano, classical piano, but I feel like country music was always in the background. These albums, the Johnny Cash albums, the Carter family albums, they were part of my parents' record collection. So I had this music in my life for a very long time. I moved to New York about 20 years ago, and circumstances brought me to the Broadway production of Ring of Fire. And so I was in the cast and a musician in the original company of Ring of Fire on Broadway, and had the great fortune of working with the Cash family and a number of just stunning country music artists as we built Ring of Fire from the ground up. And the show ran on Broadway at the same time as the movie Walk the Line was out. And so people kind of got a double whammy of Johnny Cash all at the same time. Ring of Fire went on to have a life beyond the Broadway production. The Broadway production had 16 actor, singer, musicians. This 5-person version was developed shortly after that by the director and other members of that original Broadway company. So as you can imagine, the share of the workload on stage sort of doubles, triples for everybody. We are doing that 5-person actor, singer, musician version of Ring of Fire here. And what I think we've done is put together a cast that reflects the world we live in today. While we are giving you authentic Cash vibes, we are certainly looking to connect to this music in a different way, in a more contemporary way. There's a lot of noise in the world, and I feel like what we're after here is a way to make music together in the same room, in the same space, at a time when we are just getting comfortable. I can't even tell you like how good it feels to be back in a room, making music together, singing together in one space at the same time. That's my goal with the show, is to connect us, to remind us that we can put down our gadgets, close our computers, shut off all of our devices for a minute and just be together. The simplicity of being together in the moment, especially around this great, great catalog of music. There are over 25 songs in the show, and we do all of the hits. You'll recognize a lot of this music. I've realized that not everybody knows this music anymore. I feel like there was a time where everybody knew Johnny Cash, certainly like leading up to Ring of Fire on Broadway and leading up to Walk the Line. People knew this music, certainly the big hits. You know the famous trumpet lick going into Ring of Fire, Walk the Line, Folsom Prison Blues, but I feel like in time, fewer and fewer people know this music. So if you know Cash, that's great. You're gonna get what you came for. But if you don't know Cash, you're going to be introduced to a whole catalog of music presented by stunning actor, singer, musicians here on stage who approach it in their own way. The auditions for this show were so fun because we went seeking for types that you wouldn't necessarily imagine in a country musical. Certainly not in a Johnny Cash musical. So we auditioned hundreds of actor, singer, musicians for the show. And I ran with the personalities that rose to the top. We've got some so much charm and character and charisma on stage in this show. And I'm in love with this cast. I just sit and just want to hug them all from where I'm working. And they bring that love for the music to the stage and to their performances of these songs. They've been hard at work on this music for weeks before we even started rehearsals here. And that to me was an indication of their dedication to it, their investment in this show, and just their investment in what I'm going after here. Like finding that connection, finding community in this music, finding the heart and soul of making music.
Thank you, Randy. Today we are honored to bring you a panel of local community members who will discuss this theme of art and recovery further. The following conversation will be facilitated by Yolanda Raven, a recording artist, actor, and theater producer who lives right here in North Carolina. Yolanda, I turn this over to you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Hello, everyone. I am Yolanda Raven, and I am so excited today to be talking to you with All In Community Conversations. We are talking about Ring of Fire and art in recovery. And today's theme is in association with the Ring of Fire production that is coming from North Carolina Theater beginning on the 29th of April and going until May 8th. But before that, let's begin this talk. And let me introduce you to the amazing people who are going to be here today to talk about, again, art in recovery. First, we have Jasmine Adams. Hi, Jasmine.
Good morning.
Onslow County LGBTQ Community Center. Thank you and welcome. Thank you for being here with us today. We also have with us Mike Allen.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Be good to yourself. So glad to have you here. From Healing Transitions, we have Wendy White and Chris Budnick.
Good morning.
Good
Hello.
morning.
Glad to be here.
And excitingly, we have Brian Coram with us today. Hi, Brian.
Hey, how's it going? Glad to be here.
Yeah, so good to have you guys. So before we get into my questions, I really would like for you all just to take a quick moment to introduce what you do, who you are, and how I think you're going to so nicely contribute to this conversation. Why don't we start with Wendy?
Hi, I'm Wendy White. I'm the development director at Healing Transitions, which is a local nonprofit that serves homeless, uninsured, and underserved individuals experiencing addiction issues. Mm-hmm. So I also am an artist, and I was introduced to Healing Transitions through teaching intuitive painting workshops for the participants.
Nice. I have to ask you, Wendy, did you paint what's behind you?
I did.
Very lovely. Chris, can you talk to us a little bit about Healing Transitions? I know you and Wendy work together.
Yeah, thanks. Healing Transitions first came to the community opened in 2001, a men's campus in Raleigh, serving Wake County, and then in 2006 opened a separate women's campus, and we provide services on demand at no cost to the individual and use a peer-based approach to recovery.
I love that. Mike, talk to us about Be Good to Yourself.
Oh, hi, I'm Mike Allen. I'm a community volunteer and a benefit organizer, especially in the music space. I have worked on organizing benefit concerts for equality in North Carolina during the whole HB2 debacle. I've also done some animal rights benefits. And right now I'm working with Be Good to Yourself, which is a nonprofit that we started to provide free mental health counseling and substance abuse help for North Carolina musicians who otherwise would not be able to afford that. So, yeah, we've been doing that for a couple of years, and I can talk more about that later. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Jasmine.
Hey, I'm an advocate for the trans and LGBTQ community, board member of the Onslow County LGBTQ and Trans Community Center, where my focus is people in alternative lifestyles who deal with recovery or need recovery. We just started our first home for LGBTQ and trans. Not only that, I am a person in recovery myself. I'm a transgender female myself. And I am an entertainer for 20 years, professional female impersonator. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Brian.
Hey, I'm an artist and I'm a musician. Also a person in long-term recovery. I'm an alumni of Healing Transitions, so I went through that program, and I'm really grateful that that's a part of this community. It pretty much saved my life, and yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm involved with, I own my own screen printing company. That's something new, so I'm got my hands in a few things.
Well, it's exciting to know that I have so many artists here today with us because we're talking about art and recovery. And I want to talk about Johnny Cash, right? And his experience, because we all know that it was well documented about his addiction and his recovery. And I know we can name countless other performers who've actually had the same kind of struggle, including some of you who just spoke about it. And Billie Holiday comes to mind, Andy Warhol, Amy Winehouse. I want us to see if we can have a real conversation about a link between addiction and artist. So I know, Brian, you talked about your experience a little bit. Talk to me about that question.
Well, sure. Yeah, I believe that, I was born an artist at a very young age. I was drawing, and I've always kind of pursued that. I've thought about this question before, pondered it on myself, and how I, got to be, an addict. Was it the artist? Was it the art first, and the addiction that came, or vice versa? I don't really know if I have a very firm answer to the question. It's something that I think about. I think that artists, for one, are highly sensitive people. They can be, so that sensitivity can be like a dual-edged sword. It can help you to step in somebody else's shoes, to see the world from a different angle, different place. But also at the same time, it can lead to being hurt easily. And so curiosity. I think that any good artist is curious and about pushing boundaries, about going into some depths of places that are kind of, let's say, I don't know, not conventional.
So that's an interesting point you raised. You said not conventional and being pushed into a place. And I'm just curious again to this question of the link. Is that an addictive persona to do that, to dive into something that is not you? And Brian, after you answer that, I want Jasmine to pick up on that, because I know you spoke of being an impersonator, and so you are becoming something else other than maybe who you are. But Brian, can you talk to that a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think that it's just in order to make original art, one has to kind of think outside of the boundaries of things. For me personally, when that led to addiction, for a while, I felt that drugs were helping me out, reaching a state. And soon that turned on me. I realized that I was actually a slave to substances, and that I couldn't really get anything done because that's all I was thinking about. I think, with Johnny Cash, to relate it to that, when he has that lyric, I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. That's a powerful lyric. I think that when he thought that lyric and wrote it, that he knew that was like a little edgy or a little strange, especially for that time. Right. So, that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Jasmine, what do you think?
I think that when we think about addiction, we think about the substance, whether it be the alcohol or whether it be the drugs, and I think like this is a prime example that addiction has no boundaries. It does not care if you are an entertainer. It does not care if you're a doctor. It does not care if you are born in poverty. My experience is that I was at the height of my career, and I still could not like stop, you know. And actually, it was like my promoters and all these people that were surrounding me to say, you need to go get help. So and it wasn't the substance, it was this thing that I felt like there was something missing, or these voices that I was hearing that whenever I used it stopped that. And the only other place when we talk about this link between the two, that's what I felt when I entertained as well.
Mm.
And so when I came into recovery, it was sort of made known to me that, well, you can't do that anymore because you're putting yourself in this position. And so I'm sure, let me keep it on me, is that, if you are someone like Johnny Cash and you're in recovery, that you hear those opinions that you can't do this. And that was like, if you've ever had a loved one that died or something that was really important to you, I was in mourning. I mean, I was trying to recover, but at the same time, this thing that I did love that kept me in a safe place and it quieted those voices like the drugs and the alcohol did, which I couldn't do no more. I couldn't do that anymore either. So I was in this like lingo space.
Yeah, I think, and thank you all for just being so candid and sharing about your experience. I think what's most interesting about this topic, especially as it relates to Johnny Cash, is that this was back in the 50s, right? And in the 60s, when addiction to pills like amphetamines that Johnny Cash was abusing, it was new, right? It was a phenomenon. And I'm just curious about today in this opiate crisis that is considered a health emergency by the United States Department of Health and Human Services. What do we need to understand about the prescription drug misuse in the world today?
Yeah, that's a very relevant question, and I think that it's got a very long and complicated history. And one of the things that I'll do to provide context around that is that since the early 1800s, there's been an evolution of new opioid preparations. Morphine's isolated from opium in 1804, codeine's isolated from opium in 1832.
Wow.
And there's a significant rise in opioid problems. And you start finding things like heroin being introduced in 1898 as an alternative to morphine, as a safer, non-addictive. And so when we come to the 1990s and we see OxyContin being marketed as both not addicting and also really something that's a threat to a very small percentage of people that are considered to be addiction prone and not just to the general public, we see that there's this very long history of both innovation and then unintended consequence, particularly around misinformation, aggressive marketing, and profit-driven strategies for getting these medications into the community. We see the same thing with amphetamines in the 50s and 60s, where a lot of addiction is started through physician prescriptions. And so a lot of times that's referred to as iatrogenic addiction, which is kind of medically initiated problems with substances. So the thing that's of interest to me is what we are experiencing with the current opioid epidemic is not a new phenomenon, and it's something that's got a 200-year history of evolution.
Yeah, thank you for that, Chris. That was amazing. Does anyone else want to talk to that question of what's happening, to Chris's point, with the prescription drugs? And
Yeah.
maybe back to that first point, linking it to artist, right? How do we get connected to it?
Well, I'm kind of a product of the opiate epidemic, and that it was just uh, like I said, I was already maybe prone to addiction, and then it was just so easily out there.
Mm.
Like the mid, like 2010s and around then,
But
OxyContin
Brian,
is
I'm going to stop you. You just said
sure.
an interesting comment. You said you were prone to addiction. Were you prone to addiction because you're an artist or because of something else?
That's the question. I think that maybe it's something that was in my soul when I was born. I don't know. I've always been curious about, trying things, and for a long time I got away with it. I mean, I started kind of doctor shopping to get like certain drugs that I thought would help me. I mean, there's like other kinds of amphetamines that for like primarily given to people with ADHD. That was the first thing I started abusing. And then those pills, OxyContin, were just out there. I know a guy that was flying to Florida to doctor shop. He would do like a fake MRI or some kind of scheme there, and he'd come back and we just have all these pills. And I don't, I think Chris pretty much nailed it on the head. He's always got the history down. It's pretty impressive. The just how the pharmaceutical company, just how they advertise these pills as non-addictive.
Yeah. And so today we're talking about art and recovery, right? And Chris, you have that amazing knowledge. Wendy, I'm curious, just on the concept alone of how we find recovery, right, in the mess of the industry that makes it so easily available. The prescription drugs. What is the answer? What is the path to recovery, in your opinion?
So I think the path of recovery is different for everybody. It truly lies in when that person has hit their personal bottom. You can't will your way out of addiction. You can't love your kids enough to want it. You can't want your job enough to want it. It literally has to come from a source of pain that puts you on your knees. It makes you ready to have, a spiritual experience that's going to bring you, out of that bottom. I think that going back to, your question about, is this directly linked to artists? I think that one difference between kind of your path to addiction and then your path to recovery is that for artists in your craft is all about bearing your soul. I mean, an accountant isn't bearing his soul while he's crunching numbers all day. So it creates this vulnerability because, you're really exposing yourself all day, every day as an artist. And one common denominator we all have, whether you're the accountant or the artist or the stay-at-home mom, is fear. So I think that, fear of failure, fear of, that imposter syndrome. I mean, all of these things that play into our life, that negative narrative that goes on in your head. So being an artist and having that next level vulnerability that you're sharing with the world, you're also in a culture where drugs, alcohol are right at your fingertips all the time.
Right.
So while you're already kind of maybe are predisposed, or you've worked your way into changing your brain chemistry, that you're now dependent on a substance.
Right.
It's right there. It's right there at your fingertips.
Yeah. I remember a few moments ago, Brian, you had talked about this lyric that Johnny Cash sang and how profound it was. The idea of watching a man die at your hands and finding perhaps some joy in it. And I think what's interesting about that is almost to what you were saying, Wendy, what you tell yourself matters. And I'm imagining that in the process of being addicted, that one might tell themselves that this is the life. But what's interesting, I think, about Johnny Cash is that what he began to tell himself was associated with the songs that he was singing, right? And some of the themes in his song, pain, struggle, but also redemption, right? And also hope. And I'm just curious, given that these are some of the themes of his songs, and the fact that he has also said that they're powerful, these songs, right? And at the times, they've been his only way back, right? The only door out of the dark, he said. Bad places, the black dog calls home. I'm just curious, in your experience, what does the power of art, or perhaps even words, lyrics, the things that you tell yourself, play in this journey to recovery? And I know we haven't heard from you, Mike, so I'm going to just call on you and ask if you can answer.
Well, I'm not a musician or an artist,
Oh,
but I'm around.
But you're
I'm
around
them, and I could kind of echo what Wendy and Brian both said in terms of the music side. That you always have access to these. I mean, it's part of I talked to a musician friend of mine who said, during load in, people are handing you beers. During sound check, you're having beers. In that dead time between, the sound check and the show, you're hanging out in the green room. There's alcohol. So I've seen musicians it's just become part of the routine. And it also helps calm the nerves when you get up on stage, but there's so much pressure for these folks to perform literally when they're up in front of a crowd that they sometimes go to alcohol and drugs to help them do that. With Cash, he was of an era where we really, exalted these folks as being strong and, role models almost. It's kind of like what was happening in Hollywood with men and women staying closeted because it was such a taboo thing. But for someone like Johnny Cash, who was perceived as this pillar of strength to be reliant on these substances, it's very revealing. And there's no telling how many other people are struggling with that.
I think it's absolutely revealing. But again, what's most important about Cash's story is that he began to sing songs of redemption, right? Songs of hope. And so I want to tie back in, and anyone can answer this question. Again, this art of recovery, right? And even to recovery and using art to get there. I'm just curious, Jasmine or Brian, did you use your art to recover?
And I have to say that I'm doing it now. When I go back to what I was saying earlier, that there was a sense of mourning that I couldn't entertain anymore. And I stopped entertaining for years. And very similar to Johnny Cash, I have a history of relapse. Year here, 2 here. And just this whole, now I entertain again. My art has changed because when you think of this type of entertainment, you think of rhinestones and feathers. I do songs that tell my story as an addict, and it's amazing how people are responding to it. And I had to come up with a plan with my sponsor. I had to say, hey, I can't go into the nightclubs anymore. I do brunches that are 11, 12 o'clock during the day. I have my own show here in Onslow County, and I also the service of working with other people and letting them know, hey, if you're trans, lesbian, drugs and all that's not an alternative, find something you love. Right. Once I realized I love this, right, and it's not, I guess you've always heard it, what I'm doing is how I'm doing it. Right. And like what has been said earlier, there's so much of that danger in certain places. I had to change my spaces. And I had to change the purpose of what I was doing. Let me add one point. For me, the entertainment also. See, I have an addictive personality. So when I heard those people clapping and applauding, I was just addicted to that as I was to that substance when I first picked it up.
Right.
Because that made me feel
good,
better than how I was feeling. And you hear about most entertainers saying that they're introverts, like they're this thing, and then and I can imagine that's what it was for me. I was so, anything that made me feel better about myself, I was addicted to it. So now everything is not about me.
Well, so what is it about?
First of all, telling my story and hopefully helping somebody else. And like those lyrics in that songs, that's what brought him out of the dark. This is what's bringing me out of the dark.
I love that. Wendy, talk to me. Do you relate?
Oh, 100%. So for me, I always wanted to be an artist. There was nothing else I'd rather do. And as a teenager, when I was introduced to alcohol and started to let that negative narrative play out in my head, that all of a sudden I wasn't good enough. It wasn't practical. Then fast forward through 20 years of addiction, I would, because it's in my soul, I feel like that is who I was meant to be, is to be an artist. I would try throughout addiction to paint and to be creative, but all I was doing was comparing myself to other artists. And because my art didn't look like theirs, if what I thought was good, what I perceived to be good art, I would stop. When I was trying to get sober, I needed something to do to keep me busy. And so I started painting again, and I did not care what it looked like. I just painted. And through that process, not only did it help me not use, but it helped me, find myself again. And what most importantly, it helped me find my authentic self again.
Brian, can you relate to that? Finding your authentic self through your art?
Yeah, I can. Like I said, I feel that I had the delusion that drugs were helping me out and alcohol was helping me out in the beginning. They were helping me stay up later and longer and work harder. They were, helping me be more social and less awkward feeling, and just dive into places that I, states of mind that I thought were creative, and maybe sometimes they were, but they ultimately became a full-time job, and they couldn't really do it. And I mean, being sober now and creating art and writing songs, I really realized that I didn't need it all along.
Right.
The joy is in doing it. I mean, there's two main joys of the power of art. There's doing it for the sake of doing it because you love it, whether or not anybody's going to see it. You're not thinking about financial motives. You're doing it because this is something that you care deeply and passionately about. And then the other aspect of it is that if you're lucky enough to be able to put that music or that art or whatever you create out into the world and let others connect with it, perhaps, you never really know. I mean, there are bands and artists, there's songs that I've listened to before that I've felt a deep connection with that person. Like I was almost there with them as they were writing these lyrics, and I don't even know them, and they don't. It's like, so I think that's
the power of art, y'all. And y'all saw my country come out, y'all.
Oh, yeah.
That's the power of art. But the beauty of what I'm hearing from most of you all is that you've taken that art and made it purposeful, not only for other people to hear your story, but for your own selves. And I think that's part of what Johnny Cash's life was about. And excitingly, the fact that North Carolina Theater is doing a production, Ring of Fire, about his life is going to be amazing for so many people. It runs from April the 29th through May 8th at the Duke Energy Center for the Performing Arts. And if there's anyone who wants more information about the Ring of Fire production, you can go to NorthCarolinaTheater.com. That's NCTHEATRE.com. I am Yolanda Raven, and I am so excited that I had the opportunity to meet and hear from you, Jasmine, and Mike, Brian, Chris, Wendy. This conversation about art in recovery, I think, is ongoing. And I hope people take the time to look you up, Jasmine and Brian, Wendy. Your art is amazing. And just Chris and Mike, all the resources that you talked about. Go find out more about Healing Transitions. Be good to yourself, and just know that everyone has a story, and to be kind and caring to others, because you don't know what people are going through. But at least they're going through it, and hopefully they'll get there. So again, thank you all for joining me today for our all-in community conversations. And I hope to talk to you or see you soon.
Thank you, Yolanda, and all of our insightful panelists for contributing to this meaningful community conversation today. We look forward to seeing everyone at our production of Ring of Fire. Join us next time for an engaging community conversation surrounding the themes of our upcoming production of On Your Feet, the story of Emilio and Gloria Estefan.